I'm Eleanor Brooks, 78 years old, and still run the print company I built from the ground up back when my husband thought it was just a hobby. Every morning, I wake before sunrise, brew black coffee, and review invoices while the sky turns pink. Outside my kitchen window, my name is still etched on the company door downtown, but I don't go in every day anymore, not since my knees started protesting the stairs. I'm not the kind to knit scarves or sit around watching game shows. My days still have rhythm, purpose, and routine. Even if I eat dinner alone, most nights, the walls of my home carry more silence now. But they've also carried laughter, pride, and a lifetime of trying to do what's right before I go any further. Let me know where you're listening from in the comments. And hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever been reminded that even family can take more than they give. I grew up in Arkansas, the youngest of 4 girls raised by a father who ran a grain elevator and a mother who believed in keeping your word and standing straight, even when you had every reason to bend. We didn't have much, but we had a garden and strong hands, and when I married Charlie Brooks at 22, I carried those values into our tiny rented house with peeling siding and a secondhand stove. We had our son Garrett the year we finally scraped together enough for a down payment on a house. Charlie was good to me in his own way, steady, reliable. But he never did understand why I spent weekends in the garage, fussing with a second-hand printing press I'd bought from a retired sign maker. I just liked the hum of it, the smell of fresh ink on paper, and the small satisfaction of getting a clean run without smudging. By the time Garrett was 16, I'd turned that press into a small business. Then Charlie passed away, too young, and suddenly, it was just me and my son and a company I couldn't afford to give up. People told me to sell it, take a job with health insurance and regular hours, but I couldn't not with Garrett watching me with those scared teenage eyes, like he wasn't sure the ground wouldn't fall out from under us. So I worked 12, sometimes 14-hour days, kept a cot in the office, and sent Garrett to college with a suitcase full of clean shirts and every dollar I could spare. He chose finance, said it made sense, and maybe it did, but he stopped calling once he stopped needing tuition money. When he came home for Christmas, he brought with him a young woman named Dana. All charm and ambition and a sharpness in her smile that reminded me more of a sales pitch than a person they married 2 years later. A grand wedding I paid for down to the monogrammed napkins and the honeymoon in Maui. I told myself I was building a bridge that I could buy my way into closeness, or at least civility. Dana worked in high-end real estate. Garrett made partner at an investment firm, and soon enough, they were living in a high-rise condo overlooking the river. When their daughter Claire was born, I thought, maybe, just maybe this would be different. I was there every weekend holding her tiny fingers, buying too many toys, offering to babysit so they could go out. Dana always smiled tight at that, said thank you with her teeth. Garrett mostly checked his phone. I didn't push it. But Claire, she was different from the start. Clever, gentle, curious. She asked about the machines at my print shop, wanted to know what the levers did, what the rollers were for. By the time she was 6, she was calling me Grandma Ellie and drawing me pictures of books with my name on the cover. Dana didn't like that one Sunday when Claire was 7. Dana pulled me aside in her kitchen, said she and Garrett were trying to raise their daughter their way, and maybe I was confusing things with too many gifts, too much time, too much influence. I nodded, but something in my chest tightened. I'd spent a lifetime building something from nothing, and now it seemed I was being asked to step back from the only part of my family that ever felt like mine. A year later, Dana called me with a proposition. A house she and Garrett wanted to buy, big 2-story brick, with a wraparound porch and a kitchen. You could film a commercial in. They couldn't quite afford it, not yet, but I could, and I did. They moved in by summer. Claire got the biggest room in the back overlooking the garden. For a little while, everything seemed better. Sunday dinners came back. Dana gave me long updates about the new tiles in the foyer and the custom window treatments. Garrett even asked my advice on an investment or two. But that didn't last little by little. The smiles faded. The calls stopped. The bills started coming in for renovations. I hadn't approved upgrades to things that didn't need fixing: new furniture, new landscaping, a home theater. Garrett called it maintenance the day he snapped and told me if I gave them the house, I should stop meddling with how they used it. I reminded him gently that I never gave it. I just let them live in it. He didn't like that we stopped seeing each other after that. Claire still visited, sometimes quietly, when her parents weren't home. She'd sit at my kitchen table and ask about the business, ask about life, ask about anything but them. And then came the day I told Garrett I was going to stop covering his home improvements. He invited me to see for myself what the money was for. But when I showed up that Saturday, they told me I wasn't welcome. When I reached their driveway, I noticed the street was lined with unfamiliar cars. Expensive ones, foreign makes, polished to a shine. The music was loud enough to rattle the windows of my car before I even opened the door. I told the driver to wait, not sure how long I'd be inside, then stepped out with the bags of Thai food I'd brought for Claire. Her favorite shrimp green curry still warm. I climbed the stone steps to the front porch and rang the bell. The music kept pulsing behind the door brass bass and laughter all tangled together. I rang again, longer this time, and knocked for good measure. It took a while, but finally the door opened, and there stood Garrett, glass of champagne in one hand, confusion written all over his face. "Mom," he said, blinking at me like he'd seen a ghost. "I told you I'd be coming by today," I reminded him, holding up the food. He glanced over his shoulder, then back at me. "You didn't say what time." I told him I'd spoken with Claire that morning. She said he and Dana had plans at the country club. "So, what was this? We had a change of plans," he said quickly. "Just a small reception. Some business associates." "It's not really a good time, Mom." I looked past him into the house. People in cocktail dresses and tailored jackets stood in the living room, sipping from long-stemmed glasses, chatting beneath the chandeliers I'd paid for. Dana caught sight of me and just as quickly turned away. "I'm not here to make a scene," I said. "I just wanted to see Claire and get a look at the renovations you keep mentioning." "Claire's not home," he said flatly. "She's at a friend's. And as for the renovations..." He paused, reached into his jacket, and handed me a folded document. "This is the latest invoice. You'll see how much we've had to cover lately." I unfolded the paper and scanned the numbers. The figure was higher than what I'd paid for my first home. "We never discussed this," I said. "We don't discuss much at all anymore," Garrett snapped. "You just send money when you feel like it and act like that's love. I've always tried to help when you needed it." He gave a bitter laugh. "Help? You've always had the upper hand. You control everything through your wallet." This house, our lives. I looked at him, my son, the boy I raised alone, who now stood in my doorway with strangers behind him and a glass of champagne in his hand, talking like I was the outsider. "I bought this house," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I pay the taxes, the insurance, the bills. And I let you live in it, Garrett. That was my gift to you." "It'll be ours eventually," he said, trying to sound casual, but his tone was sharp. "You mean after I'm dead?" I said. He hesitated. "Take your time, son. I'm not going anywhere just yet." He didn't answer. I held out the bags of food. "I brought this for Claire. She said she'd be home." "She changed her plans," he said, looking anywhere but at me. "I'll just leave it here." I set the bags on the porch, hands suddenly cold. "Tell her I stopped by." "Mom," he said, lowering his voice, "if you want to come inside tonight, you'll need to settle the balance. For the renovations. For everything." I stared at him. "You're asking me to pay to come into my own house?" "It's not like that. It's exactly like that." Dana appeared beside him. "Eleanor, this isn't the time," she said smoothly. "Garrett's under a lot of pressure. We're entertaining important people tonight." "I just wanted to see my granddaughter," I said. "She's not here," Dana said, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "And as for the repairs, we'd be happy to send you pictures or schedule a video call to walk you through the updates at a more appropriate time. The door started to close. One more thing, I said just before it clicked shut. Don't send me another bill. Not for this house. Not for anything. I won't be paying any more. And with that, I turned and walked back down the steps. I didn't look back. The car was still waiting where I'd left it. I climbed in, sat stiffly in the seat, and asked the driver to take me home. Then I told him to turn up the music. The ride passed in silence, the kind of silence that stretches across your chest and settles behind your ribs. I didn't cry, didn't yell. I just watched the road unspool in front of me, block after block, until the neighborhoods changed. The sidewalks cracked a little more, the lawns a little smaller. At home, I peeled off my shoes, set down my purse, and poured myself a glass of red wine. I stood at the window, watching the last of the sun fade behind the rooftops. Then I picked up the phone and dialed the number I knew by heart. Mort Stafford. Mort, it's Eleanor. He didn't ask if I was all right. He just said, I'm here. What do you need? I need to revise my will, I said. And the deed on the house. There was a pause. What happened? It's a long story, I said. Can you come by? Give me 30 minutes, he said. I'll bring the paperwork. By the time he arrived, I had coffee brewing and a bottle of cognac set out just in case. Mort sat in the chair he always used, took one look at me and said, Tell me everything. So I did. When I finished, he shook his head. He told you to pay before coming in. I nodded and handed me an invoice. You're still the legal owner, he said. You can revoke their right to live there anytime you want. I want to do it, I said, and I want to change the will. No house, no controlling stake in the company, nothing that could be used to destroy what I've built. He leaned back in the chair, watching me carefully. You sure this isn't about what happened tonight? That it's not just raw feelings, I'm sure. I'll start drafting everything he said. But Ellie, you may want to talk to Claire first. She's the one bright spot in this mess. Don't let this cut her out too. I'll talk to her, I said. Just not tonight. The paperwork would take a few days. The process even longer. But something had already shifted. Something in me had settled. I didn't know what the next weeks would bring, but I knew this Garrett had shown me exactly who he was. And I had finally stopped pretending I didn't see it. The morning after Mort left, I woke up before the sun like I always do. I didn't open my laptop, didn't check emails, just sat at the kitchen table with my coffee and stared at the window while the light shifted across the floor. I could hear the clock ticking behind me louder than usual. The house was quiet, too quiet. I kept thinking about Claire. Garrett said she'd been at a friend's house during that party. But something about the way he said it didn't sit right. I hadn't heard from her since. She usually called at least once a week. I left her a message the night before asking her to call me back. But there was nothing. I called again that afternoon, straight to voicemail. I didn't say much, just that I missed her and wanted to make sure she was all right. By the end of the week, Mort had the documents drawn up. The new will, the ownership revisions, all of it. He said it was ready whenever I was. We scheduled a time to meet the next day. He told me to bring my ID and a clear head. That night around 7, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, there was Claire standing in the hall, in a windbreaker, hair pulled back, eyes red like she'd been crying. She didn't say a word at first, just stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me. I'm sorry I didn't call sooner, she said. I just saw your message. It's all right, I told her, keeping my voice low. Come in. Sit down. She followed me to the living room and curled up on the corner of the couch like she used to when she was little. Her bag was still slung over her shoulder. I brought your favorite tea, I said. Chamomile with honey. She nodded. I went to the kitchen, fixed the tea, and brought it back on a tray. She took the cup in both hands but didn't drink right away. They wouldn't let me talk to you, she said quietly. That day you came by, I was upstairs. I heard everything. Dad told me to stay in my room. I sat across from her and let her talk. I wanted to come out, she said. I wanted to say something, but it got loud, and I didn't want to make it worse. Then later, Dad came up and told me you'd left, that you were being difficult. She looked up at me. That wasn't true, was it? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Claire stared at the cup in her hands. I've been meaning to tell you something for a long time, but I didn't know how. I didn't want to hurt you. What is it? She hesitated. They've been talking about getting the house signed over, getting you to transfer the deed to Dad. Mom's been pushing it for months, said you're not getting any younger, and it's time to secure the asset. They used that word. Asset. I didn't move. I heard them one night, Claire said. They thought I was asleep. Mom said that once the house was officially theirs, they'd sell it and move someplace even fancier. Bay Hill, maybe? Or out near Bellhaven. She wanted to invest the difference in some new business venture. And your father? He didn't say much, just listened. But he didn't argue. I looked at her. She looked so tired. I should have told you earlier, she said. But I was scared. I didn't want to make things worse between all of you. You did the right thing, I said. It's not your job to fix what they broke. She leaned back into the cushions and let out a breath she'd been holding. I can't go back there, she said after a pause. Not right now. Not after what happened. Can I stay here for a while? You can stay as long as you want. That night, I made up the guest room. It still had the quilt from when she was little, the one with the faded sunflowers. She changed into an old t-shirt and disappeared under the blankets without another word. I stood in the doorway for a moment and watched her sleep. She looked peaceful for the first time in a long time. The next few days settled into a rhythm. Claire went to work each morning, came home in the evening, and we'd eat together in the kitchen, just the two of us. Sometimes we ordered takeout. Sometimes I cooked. We talked about her job, the books she was reading, what she wanted to do next. She mentioned taking evening design classes, maybe starting something of her own one day. I didn't press. Meanwhile, Garrett kept calling, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. I didn't answer at first. When I finally did, he sounded tired and angry. You can't do this, he said. You can't just shut us out. I already have, I said. We'll take you to court. You're welcome to try. He tried to soften his voice then. Said he was sorry. Said Dana was the one who pushed all this, that he just went along with it to keep the peace. She left, you know, he said. Packed up and went to Portland. Said she couldn't handle the humiliation. I didn't say anything. Claire won't talk to me, he added. Won't return my messages. She's safe, I said. That's all you need to know. There was silence on the other end of the line. I need help, Mom. Just until we get back on our feet. I told him I hadn't made any final decisions yet, that I needed time. The next day I went to Mort's office and signed the new will. The house would not go to Garrett, nor would the business. Instead, I set up a foundation in my name, one that would help young entrepreneurs, especially women, trying to start something on their own. Claire would receive enough for her education, a small stake in the print shop if she chose to get involved. The rest would be used for grants, mentorship, and community support. Something lasting. Something useful. Are you certain? Mort asked as I slid the final page across the desk. I am. He folded the documents and placed them in a folder. You've done the hard part, he said. Now you can move forward. I thanked him and left. That night, Claire came home from work with a grocery bag in her hand. She'd stopped at the market, picked up vegetable salmon and a lemon tart for dessert. She put on music while she cooked and hummed quietly at the stove. When we sat down to eat, she raised her glass and said, "To starting over." I clinked mine against hers. The house was warm, quiet, and full again. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was holding something together that wanted to fall apart. The morning Claire found the letter, I was already out in the garden, pruning the roses near the fence. She came out barefoot, holding the envelope in both hands. Her hair was still wet from the shower. "Mom," she said, "this came to the house. It's addressed to me, but I think it's from Dad." I stood, wiped my hands on my apron, and followed her back inside. She sat at the kitchen table and opened it slowly, careful not to tear the paper. There was no return address, just a short note in Garrett's handwriting and a check clipped to the bottom. He wrote that he missed her, that Dana had left him and taken what little money they had left, that the house was falling apart and the bank had frozen their lines of credit. He said he'd been staying with a friend, but it wasn't working out. He wanted to start fresh, said he'd heard she was still speaking to me and maybe she could help. Just a little. The check was for $10. Not 10,000, not a placeholder, just 10 flat dollars. Claire set it down on the table and stared at it for a long time. "I don't know what he's asking for," she said. "This doesn't make any sense." I said nothing, just poured her a cup of coffee and slid it over to her side. Later that afternoon, I got a call from the bank. One of the old accounts, one I hadn't touched in years, had a withdrawal attempt flagged. Garrett's name was on it. I hadn't authorized it. The bank manager asked if I wanted to press charges. I told her no, not yet. Instead, I called Mort and asked him to check something for me. I wanted to know if Garrett still had access to any of the estate accounts from before I made the changes. Mort promised to look into it. By the next morning, he called back. "There's one loophole," he said. "A shared business license from when Garrett was briefly listed as a consultant for the downtown property you inherited. It's been inactive for years, but the linked account still exists. That's how he tried to move the funds." I asked him to close it immediately. He said he already had. Claire spent most of that weekend in her room. She'd say she was reading, but every so often, I'd catch her sitting on the back porch, just staring out toward the tree line, like she was waiting for something. Sunday morning, she asked if we could go out for breakfast. We drove to the diner near the old mill. The waitress still remembered her order: scrambled eggs, no toast, extra fruit. While we waited, she picked at the paper napkin in her lap. "Do you think he meant it?" she asked. "What he wrote in the letter? I think he meant to make you feel responsible." She nodded, but didn't answer. "He made his choices," I said. "We're just living in the echo of them." After breakfast, we stopped at the craft store downtown. Claire wanted to pick up a few supplies for a class she was thinking about enrolling in. Interior staging and home design. She held up 2 different sketch pads and asked which one looked more professional. We left with both. That night, she came into the living room while I was folding laundry. "I've been thinking," she said, "about what I want to do next." I waited. "I don't want to keep working at the office downtown. It's fine, but I don't see a future there. I want to apply to that design program in the city, the one near Roswell." I smiled. "You'd be good at it." She sat beside me and reached for a towel to fold. "I don't want to use his money," she said. "Not a cent of it, not even that check." "You won't have to," I said. "We'll figure it out." The next morning, I called Mort and asked if we could repurpose part of the foundation funding for Claire's tuition, provided it aligned with the mission. He said it absolutely could. "Everything's already in motion," he said. "You've done more than most would have." That same week, Garrett called again. This time I answered. His voice was thin, like he hadn't slept. "You won't take my calls?" he said. You won't help me. I did, I said. For years. I don't understand what I'm supposed to do now. You're supposed to grow up. There was a pause. I thought you were trying to teach me something, he said. When you pulled everything back. I wasn't teaching you, I said. I was protecting what mattered. From me. Yes. He didn't call again for a while. Claire mailed back the check with a note that simply said, "This won't fix anything." Days turned into weeks. Claire filled out her application, submitted her portfolio, and got her acceptance letter mid-month. We celebrated with pie from the market down the road and a walk through the park afterward. She held the letter in both hands the whole time. One evening, just before sunset, she found me at the desk in the den, sorting through old paperwork. I was thinking about moving into the guest house when classes start, she said. It's closer to the train, and it'll give me some space. That's a good idea, I said. You can make it your own. I'll pay rent, she added, even if it's just a little. We agreed on an amount. Something symbolic. Something steady. That weekend we went down together and cleared out the old storage bins, took out the faded curtains, and opened the windows to let in fresh air. She brought down books, a desk lamp, and a framed photo of the two of us from when she was in middle school. We'd been standing outside a museum somewhere, our arms around each other, laughing at something out of frame. She set it on the nightstand, without a word. By the time September came, she was riding the 7:10 train to the city most mornings, sketchpad tucked under one arm, hair pulled back, eyes bright. She still came home most evenings. Still called me from the train when she had a long day. But something in her had shifted. She was no longer waiting on permission to begin. Claire had been living in the guest house for about a month when the envelope showed up. It was wedged between the phone bill and a real estate flyer. No return address, but the handwriting was familiar, heavy, and rushed like someone trying to sound confident when they weren't. Inside was a single page and a copy of an old photograph. I recognized it immediately. It was taken in the backyard 20 years ago, back when the trees were smaller and the garden hadn't filled in yet. Garrett stood behind the grill. Dana had her arm around him. I was holding Claire, who must have been 5 or 6. Everyone was smiling. Everyone looked like they belonged. The note wasn't long. Just a few lines from Garrett. Thought you'd want this back. I don't expect anything. Just wanted you to remember how things used to be. I folded the letter and left it on the kitchen table. Claire was out for the day. She had a workshop and a study group after. I didn't want her to see it right away. Not like that. I spent the afternoon cleaning the upstairs closet. Not because it needed it, but because I didn't want to sit still. I found a box of old Christmas cards tucked behind a bin of winter coats. Inside was a card Garrett had made in second-grade construction, paper glitter, crooked letters that said, "You're the best mom." I closed the box without looking at the rest. By evening, I'd moved the photo and letter to the drawer near the phone. Claire came home just before dark, arms full of sketches and a roll of fabric swatches. She was tired, but in good spirits. We had leftover soup and half a loaf of cornbread. Then she told me about the group critique they'd done in class. One of her instructors had pulled her aside afterward and told her she had a natural sense for balance in space. She was beaming. Maybe I'll open a staging business one day, she said. Small homes, people downsizing, that kind of thing. You'd be great at that, I said. People like someone who listens. The next morning, I got a call from Mort. There's something you should know, he said. I got wind that Garrett's looking into legal options. He's talking to a firm upstate. Can he contest the changes? Not likely, Mort said. Everything's airtight. But it doesn't mean he won't try to stir up trouble. I thanked him and hung up. The wind had picked up outside. Leaves scraped across the porch like whispers. I didn't tell Claire right away. She was busy with an upcoming project one of her classmates had asked her to co-lead the design for a charity auction event. She'd been working late, pulling fabrics, sketching floor plans, even staying in the city overnight a few times. But by the end of the week, it came to a head. I was in the backyard cutting back the hydrangeas when I heard raised voices from the front of the house. Claire was home, and she wasn't alone. I walked around to the driveway and saw Garrett standing at the foot of the steps. His car, one I didn't recognize, was parked half on the lawn. He looked thinner than the last time I'd seen him. His jacket was rumpled. Claire stood between him and the door, arms crossed, jaw tight. "You can't just show up," she was saying. "You need to leave. I just want to talk to her," Garrett said. "One conversation, that's all. She doesn't owe you that." He spotted me then. "Mom," he called out, "can we talk?" "Please," Claire turned to me. "You don't have to do this." I stepped forward and looked at Garrett. 5 minutes, I said. "On the porch." He followed me up the steps. Claire went inside and closed the door behind her. We sat across from each other. The porch creaked under his weight. He looked around like he didn't recognize the place. "I know I messed up," he said. "I know I said things I shouldn't have." I waited, but I'm trying to fix it. I've been going to meetings, got a part-time job at a warehouse. I'm not drinking. "Good," I said. I thought maybe we could talk about the house, about the family business. There's still time to make things right." I shook my head. "That time passed, Garrett. You made your choice." His face hardened. "So that's it. You're cutting me out forever. I'm not cutting you out. I'm setting a boundary." He stood abruptly. "You think Claire's some kind of saint? She ran away when things got hard. You don't know half of what she—" I stood too. "That's enough." He looked like he wanted to say more, but didn't. He turned and walked down the steps. Before he got to the car, he turned back. "You'll regret this," he said. "One day, you'll need me." I watched him drive off. When I came back inside, Claire was in the kitchen drying her hands with a towel. She didn't ask what he'd said. I didn't offer it. She poured 2 glasses of water and handed me one. "You did the right thing," she said. That night, I sat at the desk in the den and wrote a letter. Not to Garrett, to myself. I wrote down everything I wanted to release the guilt, the second-guessing, the questions about whether I could have done something different. I folded the page and tucked it in the back of the ledger behind the foundation bylaws. The house was quiet. Outside, the wind had settled. The porch light flickered once and held steady. It was nearly March when the final letter came from Garrett's lawyer. Claire found it first stuffed into our mailbox, crumpled at one corner like it had been caught in the door. She brought it in without saying a word, set it on the kitchen table, and waited while I poured the morning coffee. The envelope was thick, heavier than the usual certified notices. I opened it slowly, careful not to tear the edge. Inside was a formal notice. Garrett had filed a civil claim to challenge the transfer of property ownership. He wasn't just making noise anymore. He wanted the house, the one he said I owed him, and any associated assets tied to the family trust. The letter included a statement filed on the basis of undue influence and misallocation of legacy holdings. Claire read it over my shoulder. "That's rich," she said, voice tight. "He couldn't even bother to call on your birthday, but now he wants the deed." I placed the letter back in its envelope and slid it into the drawer with the others. There were a few more dishes left in the sink. I rinsed them without speaking. That same week, Mort called. "He's trying to spin a narrative," he said. "Says you're not of sound mind. Claims Claire's manipulating you for financial gain." I let the silence stretch. "We'll handle it," Mort said. "I've already filed a countersuit. But you might want to brace yourself. He's pushing for a public hearing." I thanked him and hung up. That afternoon, Claire sat at the dining room table, Her laptop open papers fanned around her in careful piles. She looked up as I passed and said, "He thinks he can embarrass you into folding." I shook my head. He doesn't know what I've lived through. The hearing was set for the end of April. It wasn't a trial, just a preliminary review, but it would be public. Garrett had secured a firm from the city, all sharp suits and stern faces. Mort was calm, measured, and steady. He'd seen more of these than he cared to count. The night before, I couldn't sleep. I walked through my house, and paused in the hall outside the guest room where Claire had stayed. Her door was cracked open. She'd fallen asleep on top of the cover's notes beside her headphones still in her ears. I turned off the light and closed the door gently. Morning came gray and still. We arrived at the courthouse just after 8. The courtroom wasn't large, just a few rows of benches, a polished wood table, and the judge's seat elevated behind a short rail. Garrett was already there. He didn't look at me when we entered. Dana wasn't with him. The hearing began. Garrett's attorney did most of the talking. They painted a picture of confusion, manipulation, elder exploitation. They called Claire a financially interested party with no legal standing and questioned her motives. They implied I had been coerced, suggested the foundation, the scholarship fund, even the deed transfer had been orchestrated by someone else. I sat still, hands folded in my lap, listening. When it was our turn, Mort stood calmly and spoke with a slow, clear voice. He handed over medical evaluations, letters of competency, copies of foundation paperwork. Claire sat quietly beside me. When the judge addressed me directly, I answered every question without hesitation. "I understand exactly what I signed," I said. "I built my company from nothing. I can still read a balance sheet without glasses." The judge asked why I'd changed the terms of the family trust. "Because circumstances changed," I said. "And because legacy isn't about entitlement, it's about values." There was a pause after that. Outside, the air had warmed slightly. We waited on a bench for the paperwork to be processed. Garrett passed us without a glance and climbed into a waiting car. The judge's decision wouldn't come for a few weeks, but Mort said the signs were good. Claire and I rode home in silence. When we got back, she went upstairs. I made a pot of tea and sat in the den. On the coffee table was a stack of papers Claire had left her business proposal for the foundation project. She'd titled it, "Creating Space Transitional Design for Women Rebuilding Their Lives." It wasn't just ideas and color palettes. It was real cost estimates, timelines, sourcing plans, volunteer contacts. I read every word, slowly. That evening, I knocked on her door. She looked up from her desk. "Yeah, let's talk about your proposal," I said. She pulled out a chair, and we sat side by side. For the first time in months, we didn't talk about Garrett. We talked about what came next. Claire and I spent the next few weeks in motion. She ordered paint swatches and upholstery samples. I made phone calls to local organizations, women's shelters, community liaisons. We cleared out the old sunroom and turned it into a planning space. There was something steadying about it, watching the pieces take shape. It didn't erase what had happened, but it filled the air with something new, useful, tangible. Then just after lunch, one Wednesday, Mort called. "The ruling came through," he said. I stood by the kitchen window, hand resting on the edge of the sink. Claire was outside, measuring something along the porch trim. I waited. "The judge dismissed Garrett's claims in full," Mort said. "Affirmed your ownership. No further hearings unless he files an appeal, which, given the language of the ruling, he'd be a fool to pursue." I didn't speak right away. He gave me a moment. "There's more," he added. The judge's remarks. They were unusually direct. She called Garrett's suit an opportunistic attempt to dismantle legitimate estate planning for personal gain. She also noted your mental clarity, financial stewardship, and the transparency of the foundation's work. I thanked him and hung up. Claire came in just as I put the phone down. She saw my face. "What is it?" "We're finished," I said. "It's over." She sat across from me, hands clasped in her lap. We didn't celebrate, not out loud. But I could feel something loosen between my ribs, like I'd been holding my breath for months without realizing it. We got back to work. A few days later, we hosted a small community night in the house. We invited 4 women from the local center, all in different stages of rebuilding. One had just left a situation, one had started her own cleaning business. They walked through the rooms, touched the new counters, flipped through swatch books. Claire brought out her mock-ups. They talked softly about color function, safety light. It felt like the start of something real. The next morning, Claire brewed the coffee while I checked the mail. Among the usual bills and flyers was a handwritten envelope with Garrett's name in the corner. I set it on the table between us. "You want me to open it?" Claire asked. I nodded. She tore it gently. Inside was a folded letter, 2 pages. She read it first, eyes scanning quietly, then passed it over. He didn't apologize. He didn't take anything back. He said the hearing had been humiliating. Said he still believed the house should have come to him, that it was what Dad would have wanted. But then, in the final paragraph, he added something else. He wrote that Dana had left. That she'd read the court transcripts, the judge's ruling, and the newspaper write-up. That she told him she didn't recognize the man he'd become. That she needed space to reevaluate who she'd married. He ended with, "I hope you and Claire enjoy the house." I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. Claire didn't ask what he said. She didn't need to. That weekend, we finalized the design plans for the foundation's first living space. Claire had found a small duplex 10 blocks from the shelter, a rundown place with good bones. We toured it together, met with the owner, made a cash offer. It was accepted on Monday. We started renovations in early June. Claire oversaw most of it contractors' materials schedules. I handled licensing donations and legal paperwork. Our mornings began with lists, our afternoons with phone calls. And in the evenings we sat on the porch with iced tea, watching the summer stretch out ahead of us. One night, as the sun dipped low behind the trees, she turned to me and said, "You don't have to keep the title on the house if it makes you feel cornered. I'm not going anywhere." I looked at her. "You've earned it," I said. "It's yours after I'm gone." She didn't argue. We sat in the quiet a little longer, then went inside to finish our notes. The house had never felt so alive. The first women moved into the duplex in early August. Claire set fresh linens on the beds, rolled soft towels, stocked the kitchen cabinets with dry goods and utensils. I brought over a stack of paperbacks and a set of wind chimes for the porch. The kind with the deep notes that ring low and calm when the breeze moves through. The kind you feel more than hear. By fall, we had a second property lined up, and then a third. It didn't happen fast, and it didn't happen without paperwork and bumps and long talks at the kitchen table. But it happened. Sometimes I still hear from Garrett. Not often. Just a birthday card with no note, or a holiday photo of him and the boys. I don't answer. I don't tear them up either. They sit in a drawer by the phone. Not because I'm holding on, but because letting go doesn't always look like you expect. Claire and I keep a rhythm now. Mornings with strong coffee and local headlines, afternoons filled with real plans. There are always women stopping by the house, dropping off something or needing something or just sitting a while. The living room has turned into a kind of in-between space. Not a shelter, not a clinic, just a pause. A place to catch your breath before deciding what comes next. Last week I ran into Dana at the farmer's market. She was with her sister. She didn't look surprised to see me. We exchanged a quiet hello, nothing more. But as she turned to walk away, she said softly, "I'm sorry. For what it's worth." I nodded, not out of forgiveness, but because I heard her. There's a framed photograph on the mantel now. It's from a few months ago, our first foundation gathering. Claire's at my side, smiling. A woman named Joy is holding a bouquet, her daughter tugging on her arm. Behind them, the porch is lit up with strings of soft yellow lights. Everyone's looking toward the camera except me. I'm looking at the house, not because of what it used to be, but because of what it is now. A place where women don't have to earn their safety. A place that doesn't disappear when they speak. A place where quiet strength is enough. That's all I ever wanted. If this story reminds you of a time you stood up quietly when no one believed you would, I'd love to know. And if you're still in the middle of your own quiet fight, I hope you'll stay strong. You deserve peace. You deserve home. Thanks for listening.